Hey guys, tonight we wake up in mud. It's still dark. The rooster hasn't crowed. Your back aches like you've slept on a pile of rocks because, well, you have. The straw mattress gave up weeks ago and the fleas don't care that you're tired. They're already biting. Your blanket is damp with dew and somewhere outside a bell tolls slowly. It's not a happy bell. You sit up in the half dark, squinting through the gloom of your wattle and daub cottage. The fire went out in the night again. You can see your breath fogging in the air. There's no bread left on the table. Just a wooden bowl with yesterday's porridge crusted into the sides and a single mouse chewing on what it thinks is hope. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drag yourself outside, stepping into ankle-deep muck. It's always damp now. The skies haven't smiled in days, and the path from your door to the pig pen smells worse than the pigs. Your feet are bare. The boots were chewed by rats 2 winters ago. You don't miss them. Much. Somewhere in the distance, another bell rings, this one faster, sharper. The death bell. Again. You don't run toward it. You never do. It just means someone else didn't wake up. And in this village, that's beginning to feel like the smarter choice. Your chores wait like a jury, feeding the animals, hauling water from the stream, and fixing that hole in the roof before the rain comes again. Except your neighbor borrowed your thatch hook and hasn't been seen in 2 days. You knock on her door. No answer. But the dog inside is howling, constant, hungry, afraid. The field's still cursed. Wheat hasn't grown right in 2 seasons, and half the livestock have boils on their bellies. Last week, the chickens started laying eggs with blood inside. You sold one to the steward's cook just to see what would happen. She threw it at your head and told you the devil lived in your pantry. You think she might be right. They say it started in the South. The sickness, that is. Some sailor kissed the wrong merchant girl in Messina. Or a Genoese ship bumped into a ghost fleet drifting from the east. Historians still argue whether the plague arrived by sea overland or on the backs of Mongol arrows fired into Crimean cities. But in your world, it arrived with a cough. Not yours, someone else's, in the tavern, 4 nights ago. Now he's gone. His wife, too. His son is crying at their doorstep, clutching a doll made from corn husk and fever dreams. You give him a crust of barley bread and walk away. You're not cruel, just tired. And you can't afford to catch whatever he's holding. Funny, isn't it? You used to fear wolves and tax collectors. Now it's coughing. And bells. Always the bells. Even the priest has lost his voice from ringing them. He used to read Latin from the pulpit like it was made of honey. Now he just shakes when he holds the book. Yesterday he dropped a wafer mid-communion and cried for 15 minutes. You'd offer him comfort, but he said your freckles were a mark of Cain. Plus you're not sure he's not next. Still you go. Not to pray. Not anymore. But because it's the only place where everyone is still pretending to be alive. They've hung lavender bundles from the rafters to cover the smell. It doesn't help. The dead are piling up in the church crypt, and the rats aren't picky about scripture. You try not to breathe deeply as you kneel. You mumble the prayers with the others, mouths moving like puppets on strings. It's easier to fake belief than explain why you've stopped, especially to God. You hear someone sneeze behind you, the entire pew goes stiff. And yet, life stumbles forward. The animals still need slop. The well still needs hauling. The Lord's tax collector still needs his flour, even if it's 20% mold and 80% rats. You wonder if he notices. You wonder if he cares. He probably doesn't eat it anyway. Back at home, you check your sister's forehead. Still hot, still red. You ladle some broth into her mouth. She moans delirious, muttering the name of your father. He died last week. You haven't told her yet. Not until she's strong enough. Not until you're brave enough. Your neighbor's dog has stopped howling. You don't know if that's good or bad. Outside, a breeze picks up. The smell it carries is thick. Wood smoke, rotting meat, and candle wax. From town. The apothecary is burning herbs again. You know it won't work. He does too. But the smoke helps people pretend. As the sun sets, you listen to the crickets and the cartwheels on the road. Another body wagon rattling toward the churchyard. You used to say a prayer. Now you just hope they don't stop at your door. You curl up by the hearth and try to sleep. The rats are back. One crawls over your leg like it owns the place. Maybe it does. After all, you just live here. The rats will inherit it. You wake before the sun again, but this time it's not the cold or the coughing that stirs you. It's the silence. The kind of silence that shouldn't happen on a working farm. No cluck of chickens, no groan of the pig. Just the slow drip of condensation from the thatched roof above your face, one drop landing right on your forehead like an indifferent god, poking you with a damp finger. You sit up and listen harder. Still nothing. Then your stomach growls. Of course, that ancient internal reminder, no matter how many people are dying, you still have to eat. So you drag your aching bones outside to the field. If it can still be called that. Once it grew barley tall enough to wave in the wind like seagrass. Now it's more like a graveyard of promises, crooked stalks, moldy heads, and thistle everywhere. The soil has turned against you, dark, heavy, sour-smelling. You remember when the priest said it was cursed probably by your neighbor's daughter who used to collect frogs in her apron? She died last month. The frogs are doing fine. There's a cow lying in the ditch. Its eyes are open, but they don't blink. You already know. The flies know too. Your job today just got heavier. You pull your tunic tighter against your chest. The wind has that early chill again, reminding you that winter is coming, and that last year you barely made it through with a granary full of oats. This year, the granary is just a fancy mouse hotel. You try to till a section of earth anyway, using a hoe that's older than your teeth and blunter than your cousin Walter. The dirt clumps like wet wool. You swear quietly under your breath. Not because you think anyone hears, but because if you don't let the frustration out somehow, it might start leaking from your ears. You pause. Something rustles in the hedgerow. Probably a rabbit or a ghost. Hard to say these days. Your neighbor Henry once caught 3 rats fighting over a single plum. He called it a harvest. That was last week. Today he's selling pickled roots in the square, and he claims they prevent the plague if you chew them at midnight and don't blink. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies came from desperation or centuries of inherited nonsense, but either way they spread faster than fleas. And speaking of fleas, there's a definite itch under your collar. You scratch without thinking, and keep scratching. It's just one of many things that don't matter anymore. You trudge back toward your cottage for water, passing your neighbor's fallow land. There's a scarecrow there now, except it's not really a scarecrow, it's a body, stuffed into a tunic tied to a stake, arms out jaw slack. It's unclear if it's meant to scare away crows or invite them. You find the bucket by the well is frozen to the stone rim. The rope's rotted. You sigh so hard your ribs ache. By the time you get the water and return home, your sister has soiled herself again. Her eyes are open but unfocused. She mumbles something about your mother's bread, warm, soft, soaked in honey. You remember that bread. You also remember that your mother's been in the ground for 2 years now. And she didn't die of plague. Just regular boring death. Fever. Bleeding. The kind people used to care about before this black wind blew across the land. There's an animal noise outside. Low urgent. You peek out to find that your one remaining pig has collapsed in the mud. Its snout bubbles with slime. Its flank heaves. It stares at you with eyes full of betrayal. You know what this means. You'll have to slaughter it. Not because you're hungry, though you are, but because if you don't, it'll die on its own and the meat will sour too fast to eat. You fetch your rusty knife. As you approach, the pig snorts weakly and tries to stand. It doesn't make it. You kneel beside it and offer a quiet apology. This part you do without thinking. Like plucking a turnip. A horrible squirming turnip that once followed you around the yard and made you laugh. The meat's tough, not much fat. You hang it in the smokehouse even though you know the wood is too damp to do the job right. Everything is too damp now. Even the air feels like it's rotting in your lungs. In the afternoon, the steward arrives. He's clean as usual. Clean boots. Clean hands. Smelling faintly of lavender water. You wonder what spell he's cast to survive this long. He brings news your lord has requested more grain. And a goat. And your neighbor's daughter, who, as we've mentioned, is very dead. You try to explain. He doesn't listen. He just marks it on his parchment and leaves you with a slip of wax paper that says you owe. You look at the slip. You look at your sister. You look at the empty field. And for a moment you wonder what happens if you just walk into the woods and don't come back. But the woods are haunted, they say. Then again, so is everything else. That night, the moon rises huge and orange above the village. The air smells like garlic and wet wool. A dog howls in the distance, and someone beats a metal pot with a spoon, probably to scare off spirits. Or rats. Or spirits riding rats. As you lie down, stomach still half empty, you realize the fields aren't just refusing to feed you. They're trying to bury you too. You wake up to bells. Not the friendly kind, no cheerful chimes or clanging for weddings. These are the dread bells. Handbells, small and tinny, rung by someone stumbling through the village, shouting the same grim mantra, "Bring out your dead." You blink, groggy. The fire's gone out. Again. Your sister coughs weakly behind you, and you're not sure whether to be relieved she's still breathing or afraid that she won't be by nightfall. Either way, those bells mean you've got about 10 minutes to decide whether to lie and keep her hidden, or open the door and let the plague collectors in. Outside, the sound grows louder. It's a procession today, one of the big ones. First comes the bell ringer, cloaked and hooded, more shadow than man. Behind him, a handcart with stiffened bodies stacked like firewood, legs poking out at odd angles. A pair of shoes you recognize. You squint. Yep, that's old Elric from the bakery. You bought moldy rye from him just last week. You wince. Not because he's gone, but because that rye made you sick, and now you're not sure if it was just bad flour or the beginning of the end. The cart squeaks and groans over the cobbles. There's a trail of fluid behind it you try not to look at. A second man follows with a sack of lime, scattering it like a priest sprinkling holy water. You've heard the lime keeps the bodies from bloating too much before they reach the pit. Historians still argue whether this lime actually slowed decomposition or just made everyone feel better while the world collapsed. But you know one thing for sure, it doesn't help: the smell. Oh, the smell. You can't describe it fully because no one should have to imagine it. But it's a mix of burned garlic, sweat-drenched wool, wet earth, and something metallic that makes the back of your throat twitch. You try to breathe through your mouth, but that only makes it worse. You close your door. Inside, it's only slightly better. You light a candle. The wax sputters. Your sister groans again. You offer her a crust of bread soaked in broth. She can't chew, so you break it up with your fingers and feed her like a baby bird. You remember when she used to sing while combing her hair. Now her hair has fallen out in clumps, and her songs have been replaced with moans and dreams of warm butter. The village priest said it was a divine punishment. Then he died. Now it's Brother Matthias who does the rounds, wearing a beaked mask stuffed with herbs and oranges. He claims the scent wards off the miasma, the invisible poisonous air that supposedly carries the plague. You once saw him burning lavender at a crossroads while chanting psalms backwards. It didn't help. The baker's son still died the next morning. Still, you admire the mask. It's eerie like a bird, and a doctor had a very creepy child. You wonder if the beak helps him not vomit when he sees what the plague does to people. Your sister asks for water again. Her lips are cracked. You hand her the cup. She drinks, then stares at you with eyes that no longer see the world clearly. "Are the angels coming?" she whispers. You don't answer. Later that day, a group of villagers gathers around the well. They're arguing loudly. One man says it's the Jews. Another says it's a curse from the stars. A woman holds up a parchment claiming the Pope has the cure. Someone else spits and says the Pope hasn't answered letters in months. A boy throws a stone at a passing cat. He says cats are witches' spies. You sigh, poor cat. It's not her fault she's cleaner than most people here. The problem is people need answers. And when answers are scarce, fear takes the wheel. Historians still debate whether this is what led to the witch hunts decades later, the need to blame someone when the sky refuses to weep and the graves won't stay empty. You watch as Brother Matthias approaches. He lifts a handful of garlic cloves and presses them to each villager's chest. He mutters a prayer that sounds suspiciously like something he made up 5 minutes ago. You whisper under your breath, "Saint Garlic, protect us from breath that kills." It would be funny if it weren't so terrifying. Back at home, you light a bundle of herbs and wave it around the room. The smoke makes your eyes water. Some say it keeps the plague away. Others say it makes the spirits sleepy. You say it just makes you sneeze. You open the window for air and immediately regret it. The pit is being filled again. You can see it from your cottage now, a trench in the earth swarming with flies. Two men with long sticks poke the bodies deeper into the hole like shoving logs into a fire. One of them wipes his brow at the back of his hand and says something about going to the pub later. It's hard to imagine wanting ale after a day like this. But maybe that's the point. Anything to feel normal, anything to forget. As the sun sets, you close your door again. The bell ringer is long gone. The cart has returned to its barn. The priest's incense lingers in the air like a lie. You lie down next to your sister. Her breathing is shallow. You whisper stories to her. About fields that bloom with golden grain. About meat pies and gooseberry tarts. About the time she beat you in a foot race and made you eat dirt. She smiles just slightly. You fall asleep with your hand resting on hers. You dream of bells. You wake in the middle of the night to the unmistakable sound of scratching. Not the eerie, ghostly kind that haunts bedtime stories, just plain, infuriating, real scratching. Rats! Again! You grope for a stick near your cot, but it's too late. One's already gotten into the corner basket, nibbling what little bread you had left. A tiny thief with beady eyes and no remorse. You lunge half-heartedly. The rat darts under a chest. It knows your reflexes are dulled from hunger. You know it knows. You stare at each other for a long second, then sigh. Honestly, you're too tired to care. This is just another night in the life of a peasant during the Black Death. The rats are everywhere. They chew the linens, gnaw through baskets, even scurry over sleeping bodies when they get bold. One morning you woke with a small bite on your wrist, and your mother insisted it was just a flea. Comforting, considering those tiny insects are believed by many modern historians to be the actual carriers of the bubonic plague. At least that's the theory. Historians still argue whether the rats were the main culprits, or if it was humans all along, flea-bitten travelers, sweaty soldiers, or maybe just that one guy who coughed on everyone in the market square. But right now, you don't care who started it. You just want to keep your food. You check the bread. Half gone. You shake the rest into a cloth and hang it from the rafter out of reach for now. The rat peers at you from under the chest unbothered. It knows it'll be back. Outside, the moon hangs fat and yellow like a yoke suspended in the night sky. The silence is thick but not peaceful. It's the kind of quiet that follows disaster. No crickets, no distant singing. Just the wind and the occasional groan from a neighbor's cottage. You pull on your tunic and step outside. The air smells of ash and rosemary. Someone must be burning herbs again. Or maybe a house. Hard to tell lately. You shuffle to the fields because despite everything, despite plague and famine and loss, the crops still demand attention. No one's harvesting for you. No enchanted medieval spirit arrives at dawn with a magical scythe. It's just you, a rusting sickle, and the world's least cooperative barley. The earth is hard and unyielding. You strike at the stalks. 1, 2, 3. Your arms ache. The sweat on your brow stings where your skin is raw. You hear yourself breathing loud and labored, and for a brief moment panic creeps in. Is it plague? Is that the shortness of breath they talk about? And you pause, swallow, and wait. No boils, not yet. You get back to work, and it's in these dull, repetitive motions that your mind drifts. You remember better years. Not good years, just better. When harvests were plentiful and the Lord didn't raise the tithes 3 times in one season. When your family was whole, even if always a bit hungry. When the worst thing you worried about was whether it would rain during sheep shearing. Now you don't even know if the sheep are still alive. Last week a neighbor tried to slaughter one and found strange black patches under the wool. She burned the entire flock. The sun rises but weakly. A gray pallor hangs over the village like the world itself is ill. You glance at the thatched roofs, many sagging or abandoned. The church bell doesn't ring anymore. The priest has locked himself inside the chapel and communicates only by sliding notes under the door. Once you heard him sobbing, it didn't sound like someone with divine answers. Back home, your sister is awake but feverish. Her skin is flushed and she mumbles about birds and fire. You dip a cloth in cool water and place it on her forehead. She smiles. You lie. You say she'll get better. Oh, that it's just a fever. That you'll find honey and herbs from the healer in the next village. You don't mention that the healer died last week or that his apprentice was seen running into the woods babbling about cursed wells. Instead, you hum an old tune your mother used to sing while baking. You don't remember all the words, but the melody is enough. Your sister's eyes flutter shut. By midday, you head to the common square. A few villagers are gathered. Someone's heard of a merchant from France who sells plague charms, dried bat hearts. Silver Cross is a supposed relic of Saint Sebastian. They say it works, that it kept an entire town safe. You mutter. Probably because they kept their doors shut. Still, someone buys a charm. Someone else trades 2 chickens for a pouch of salt, claiming salt keeps the plague away when sprinkled in doorways. You watch as they form a circle of it around their home. It looks more like a summoning ritual than sanitation. Meanwhile, the rats watch from the shadows, utterly unimpressed. One of the women lights a bundle of sage and walks the perimeter of the village. She calls it cleansing. You call it something to do when you feel helpless. Historians still argue whether these rituals served any real protective purpose, or if they were just desperate distractions away to reclaim a sliver of control in a collapsing world. You suspect it's the latter. That night, thunder rolls across the sky. A storm. Rain falls finally. You stand in it for a moment, arms outstretched. You hope it washes away the disease. You hope it blesses the fields. You hope for anything, really. You return inside drenched and slightly less miserable. Your sister sleeps soundly. Her breathing is quieter. You dare to hope. You crawl onto the straw mat beside her. The rats return to their business scratching under the floorboards. You try not to think about the itch behind your ear. The storm passes in the night, and when you wake, the air smells clean for the first time in weeks, like wet earth soot and something faintly metallic. You take it in slowly, cautiously, like your lungs might reject the freshness after so much rot and smoke. Your sister stirs her fever breaking sometime before dawn. A moment of relief ripples through your chest like warm broth on an empty stomach. She's not out of danger, but at least she's not worse. You mutter a soft thanks to whoever's listening. But just outside, another sound cuts into the gentle calm, the slow, rhythmic clang of iron on iron. Not a blacksmith, not church bells. Something stranger. You peek through the warped wood of your door. A procession. They come in barefoot, bloodied, chanting in Latin, so slow it feels like time is leaking from the syllables. The flagellants. 30 or so men bare-chested despite the morning chill, moving in a line like cursed pilgrims. Each holds a knotted whip, and with every other step thwack they strike their backs. The sound is thick and wet. You wince. Again, thwack. Again, again. The village stops to watch. People emerge from cottages, half curious, half horrified. Children hide behind mothers. Dogs cower. Even the rats seem unsure what to do with this particular horror. The leader, tall with matted hair and a face like an exhausted saint, raises his arms. "We suffer," he says, voice hoarse, "so you may be spared." He cracks the whip across his own back. Fresh red beads rise where scars never healed. This was not uncommon. By 1349, these self-punishing travelers crisscrossed Europe in dramatic, anguished displays. They believed the plague was God's fury, made flesh judgment for sin, pride, and decadence. If the people wouldn't atone, the flagellants would do it for them, publicly, loudly, and very often contagiously. Because here's the twist, they spread the plague. Unwittingly, of course. But moving from town to town, bleeding openly, sleeping rough, and never washing well, let's just say personal hygiene wasn't part of the penance package. Still, to a 14th century peasant, their arrival feels divine. Or apocalyptic. Maybe both. You watch a boy join the line? Maybe 12. He copies the chants awkwardly and flinches every time he tries to lash his back. Someone hands him a whip. You want to shout to pull him back, but his mother stands nearby, weeping not with sorrow, but pride. "God will spare him now," she whispers. Historians still argue whether the flagellant movement was more about religion or about people craving structure amid chaos. Organized grief? Performative suffering? Something visible in an invisible nightmare. You're not sure which is worse. The procession moves on. They leave behind bloody footprints and a few broken spirits. Your neighbor, the one with the salt circle, begins sobbing. Her husband died yesterday. The flagellants didn't stop to bless him. You return home shaken, but there's no time to rest. The sky's cleared and the fields wait. You bring your sister some porridge thin as broth, but she eats. That's something. In the distance, you hear another bell, but not from a church. It's a warning bell. Someone's hanging a red cloth outside their home. It means sickness. Another house quarantined. You count, that's 3 this week. The red swatches flap like defeated flags claiming nothing but grief. The village has adopted its own grim rituals. Red cloth for plague. White chalk marks for the dead. Lavender bunches tied to doorposts for hope. Every house has a system now. It's like folk magic and sheer desperation got together and threw a medieval house party. And then there are the masks. No, not the bird-beaked plague doctor ones, those are mostly in the cities. Out here, people have simpler versions. Linen soaked in vinegar, leather scraps tied around the nose. Some folks just stuff dried rosemary in their nostrils and call it divine filtering. You try one briefly, you sneeze for 10 minutes straight. Probably not divine. Still, you carry a pouch of herbs. They say it wards off miasma, the bad air that supposedly spreads the plague. You don't know if it works, but it makes the air smell a little less like rot. Midday comes. You head to the well. A new sign has been posted, boil water before drinking. You scoff, as if anyone has fuel to waste boiling water. Still, you fill your jug and promise yourself you'll try. Near the well, an old man sits on a crate muttering to himself about angels and stars aligning. You recognize him. He used to be the miller. Now he's convinced the plague comes from a comet that passed weeks ago. Says he saw it himself. Bright and red as fire. Historians still debate whether the 1347 comet sightings truly influenced public panic, or whether people just needed cosmic explanations for terrestrial horror. You nod politely and back away. Back at home, your sister is singing. It's a broken, childlike melody, but you almost cry hearing it. The smallest joys feel enormous now. But that night, another bell rings. Not a warning bell, a funeral one. You grab your shawl and follow the sound. A small crowd gathers at the edge of the woods where the burial ground sprawls out like a patchwork of shallow hills. There's no priest, just a man with a spade and a cart. Inside the cart, 3 bodies wrapped in linen. One is tiny, a child. The man recites a half-remembered prayer. Then with all the grace of a sack of grain, he tips the cart and lets the bodies roll into the pit. You turn away. The air is thick with rosemary, sage, and silence. You return home without speaking. The rats are already back. You wake the next morning to an eerie quiet, the kind that makes you wonder if you've gone deaf or if the world just stopped. No carts creaking down the road, no birds, no dogs barking. Even the flies seem to be on break. The silence doesn't last. Your neighbor's rooster crows too late and too loud, breaking the spell. You get up, stretch your aching arms, and rub the back of your neck. It's damp from sweat, and you're not sure if it's from the heat or another fever inching closer. You glance at your sister, still breathing, still with you. That's enough reason to keep moving. You head into the village square to barter for a bit of cheese, maybe some onions if the rats haven't beaten you to them. But something new is posted on the public notice board, a list of names marked with a black cross. Yours is not there, but a friend's is. She was just fine 2 days ago. You helped her draw water from the well. You start to itch. Historians still argue whether the so-called plague lists that appeared in many towns were acts of organization or quiet death sentences meant to track infection or to divide the living from the soon-to-be dead. You leave the square quickly, the cheese forgotten. Back at home, the air feels heavier. You crack open the shutters and peer out toward the forest beyond the fields. Something moves there, figures in the distance, cloaked and slow. The nobles are leaving. You've heard the stories. When the plague reaches a town, the lords and ladies don't stay. They retreat to their countryside manors, places so remote they make your village look like a thriving metropolis. They load up carts with bread meat books and bolts of fine linen. Even their dogs ride in cushions while your neighbors' children are buried in unmarked pits. Some nobles take their doctors with the men in long robes who sniff flowers and write sad poetry while pretending to know things. Others just pray harder and throw lavish feasts to distract themselves. There are whispers of plague parties, masked dances where courtiers wear ribbons and pretend nothing's wrong while sipping wine steeped in cloves. No one knows if it's true or just jealousy wrapped in rumor. Either way, it feels grotesque. Still, you wonder if you had the means, wouldn't you escape too? One man did just that, Giovanni Boccaccio, the writer. He fled Florence as the city collapsed and eventually penned the Decameron, a collection of stories told by nobles hiding from the plague in a villa. Some are bawdy, some tragic, all oddly human. He turned horror into literature. You wonder if he ever felt guilty for surviving. You don't have time for books. You still need to tend your patch of land. Out in the fields, the soil is stubborn and sour. Crops wilt for no reason. No pests, no frost, just wrongness. The wheat lies flat like it's given up. Potatoes rot before sprouting. You kneel to dig and pull out a carrot the size of a child's finger, twisted and soft. You sigh and toss it into the compost heap, where rats immediately claim it like royalty. Something rustles near the tree line. You stiffen. It's a man! At least you think it is. His robe is shredded, eyes wide, fingers twitching like a broken puppet. He stumbles toward you, muttering about dreams fire and angels with empty eyes. You recognize him, one of the monks from the nearby abbey, or what's left of it. You take a cautious step back. Too late, he whispers. Too late for the lambs. He collapses, coughing violently. You don't go near him, you run. Later that night, you hear others found the monk. Some say he died where he lay. Others say he rose again and walked into the forest. People say things, now wild things. The line between death and folklore thins every day. You lie awake staring at the ceiling. A scratching noise comes from the corner. You light a stub of candle and see a rat chewing through a sack of dried peas. It pauses, meets your gaze, and does not run. You throw a shoe, it doesn't flinch. It simply continues. Rats. Everywhere. You could write a book about them if you were someone else, somewhere else, in a time where writing didn't feel like a luxury for the dying. Historians still argue over how exactly rats and fleas contributed to the spread of the plague. Some point to the Rattus rattus, the black rat, and its parasitic flea sidekicks. Others argue human fleas and lice did more damage, or that multiple strains of plague bacteria caused waves of death. The only certainty, you can't kill them fast enough. By now your hands are calloused from work and your brain is numb from grief. The church bells barely move you. The warning cloths blend into the background like rust stains. But something changes. A small group of villagers you included gather to burn herbs in a communal fire. A priest blesses the smoke, and everyone takes a turn wafting it around their faces. It feels silly but comforting. A child laughs. The sound startles everyone. Then another joins. Two kids chasing each other around the fire, giggling like this is a festival. You smile despite yourself. Life in its ragged, fragile way continues. You walk home with the faint scent of rosemary in your cloak. You feed your sister the last of the porridge and tuck her in tight. Outside, a star falls. You make a wish not for wealth, not even for health. You wish for tomorrow. You wake before dawn, your breath fogging in the chill. Another morning, and yes, you're still here. Your joints ache and your knees crack as you stand, but you've grown used to your body whispering complaints. You stoke the fire back to life and stir a pot of thin barley broth, careful not to wake your sister who finally slept through the night. Today you've agreed to meet others near the church. Not for mass, there hasn't been a proper one in weeks, but for something stranger. They've arrived. The flagellants. Even if you've never seen them before, you've heard the songs. They echo through the woods like a broken prayer mixed with thunder. Voices thick with pain drums made of stretched hide and feet, stamping mud into ritual. You step outside and spot them on the far road, a snaking column of white-robed men, bare-chested despite the cold whips dangling from their hands. Their backs are already marked with old scars and fresh blood. They chant in Latin, though few in the village know what it means. It sounds like the end of the world, and maybe that's the point. Flagellants believed that the plague was a punishment from God, a divine slap across humanity's rotten face. Their solution: beat themselves before he did. Literally. These men wander from town to town, lashing their own flesh in public squares, crying for mercy, wailing about sin, and inviting others to join. Some villagers welcome them as holy warriors. Others hide indoors and bolt their shutters. You're not sure where you fall on that spectrum. Historians still argue whether the flagellant movement helped slow the spread of the plague or made things worse. One camp suggests their traveling bands were early super spreaders. Another argues their presence comforted communities with a sense of control, even if it was through shared suffering. One thing's certain, they left an impression. You follow the crowd to the chapel ruins where the flagellants are setting up. There's no stage, just dirt and stone, and yet it feels theatrical. The leader, a man with a shaved head and sunken eyes, steps forward. He speaks with such conviction that even the birds fall silent. He blames greed, pride, lust. He says this plague is proof the world must be purified, scrubbed clean with blood. Then he drops to his knees and pulls the whip tight across his shoulders. The first crack is sharp enough to make you flinch. He doesn't scream though others do. One by one, they fall into rhythm whipping, crying, bleeding into the dust. A drum beats steady like a heartbeat, and the scent of sweat blood and ash mixes with incense. A few villagers weep. One woman faints. Another joins them, pulling off her shawl and shouting something about her dead husband. You back away slowly. Whatever this is, it doesn't feel like salvation. It feels like something older, something primitive. Not faith, but fear dressed in robes. The next day, the village is quieter. The flagellants have moved on, leaving only stained earth and torn pages of scripture behind. Children poke at the blood-soaked ground with sticks. Your sister asks if God is angry with her. You don't know what to say. But later that week, something shifts. More people are dying, fast. One man goes from healthy to dead in 6 hours. Another's skin turns black around his armpits before he collapses. No time for goodbyes. No time for prayers. Just quick burials in the frozen earth if they're lucky. If not, they join the plague pits. Yes, the pits. You've heard about London's mass graves, giant trenches dug in haste, bodies piled like firewood. Some say you can smell them from the Thames. Others say the bodies haven't rotted properly, preserved by the strange, damp chill of death. You wonder what it would be like to dig one, to throw in someone you loved and cover them with dirt. You pray you'll never find out. Some say the plague pits glow faintly at night. That's probably nonsense. But people are desperate for meaning for myth. One man swears he saw an angel fly out of one winged in soot and crowned with lilies. Another claims the dead whisper warnings to those who dare sleep nearby. You don't go near them, but you hear of strange cases. A woman who survived after being buried alive scratched her way out with bloodied fingernails. A child found asleep on a heap of corpses, perfectly healthy. And once a man who dug through 12 bodies to recover his wife's wedding ring. They say he never spoke again. Historians still argue about why some people survived while others perished in hours. Was it genetics, diet, blind, to chance? Some think certain blood types had a better chance. Others think it had more to do with flea resistance or a lack of lice. The truth is, we still don't fully understand how or why some lived. And when no one knows anything, fear becomes law. Back in your village, fear is rising. People shun one another. No more shared meals, no visits to neighbors, no tending the sick. Some even stop burying the dead altogether. A man is spotted throwing his mother's body in the river. He says it's the safest place for her now. The water doesn't judge. You return home and hug your sister. She feels warm. Too warm. You try not to panic. Instead, you cook a stew. Herbs, roots, a sliver of dried meat. You burn juniper in the corner and mutter a prayer. Then you sit by her bed and sing softly a lullaby your mother used to hum when she was too tired to speak. The candle flickers. Tomorrow will come, or it won't. But for now, you are together. The bells are silent. And that's how you know something is deeply wrong. For weeks, no months now, the village bells have been tolling constantly. Morning, warning, marking another life extinguished. But now they've stopped. The bell ringer is gone. No one knows where. Maybe he fled. Maybe he was taken. Either way, the silence is louder than sound. You walk outside and look toward the manor house on the hill. Empty windows stare back. The noble family left weeks ago. They packed wagons and the night furniture, silver tapestries, and fled to their countryside retreat. Rumor says they're still alive, throwing feasts, dancing by candlelight, while the rest of the world decays. It doesn't surprise you. The rich always find a way to float above the mud. You try not to resent them, but it's difficult when your stomach growls and you catch the faintest scent of roasting meat carried on the breeze. It must be from their estate miles away. That or your imagination turning cruel again. Historians still argue whether nobles isolating themselves helped preserve their bloodlines or simply delayed the inevitable. Some say they were selfish cowards. Others argue they were simply better prepared with stores of food, clean water, and enough space to avoid one another. Probably both. You head to the edge of the fields. What once grew golden and thick now withers under the weight of abandonment. There's no one left to tend them, no one to reap or sow. Just brittle stalks and scattered feathers from a raven's last meal. You recall what someone once said in the village tavern? The only thing harder than dying during the plague is surviving it. You didn't understand then, but you do now. Your neighbors are thinning like ghosts. Some have locked their doors and refuse to come out. Others wander aimlessly, muttering to themselves or clutching charms around their necks. Bits of bone tin crosses strings of garlic that reek worse than the dead. And then there are the masks. You've seen them once, strange bird-like faces worn by physicians in the cities, long beaks stuffed with herbs. They say the doctors wear them to keep out the miasma, the bad air that carries disease. But they look more like crows than saviors hunched and faceless eyes hidden behind black glass. You wonder if they help at all. One man in town made a mask of his own, painted a gourd white, and wore it over his face. He claimed it worked because the plague doesn't like squash. 2 days later, he collapsed while picking nettles and died before sunset. His mask rolled down the hill and shattered on a rock. You chuckle at the memory not because it's funny, but because it's absurd. Laughter is one of the last things you still own. Food is harder to claim. You take to scavenging, digging under old roots, foraging wild berries, trying to catch the occasional squirrel. You heard the manor kitchens once cooked with cinnamon cloves, even sugar imported from places you can't pronounce. Now you dream of stale bread. You've seen the nobles in better times. Red silks, jeweled collars, gowns so wide they needed servants just to walk through doorways. Now they're locked behind thick walls, hiding from the very peasants they used to command. Still, their escape doesn't mean peace. You hear rumors that some noble retreats have turned into prisons. Servants infected, entire families locked in their great halls, slowly dying together while the chandeliers flicker and the wine runs dry. There's a tale of one lord who went mad and set fire to his own ballroom, screaming about devils under the floorboards. It's probably just a story. Probably. Historians still debate the impact these noble quarantines had on the wider feudal order. Some believe they led directly to the breakdown of social hierarchies. Others say the change came much later through war and revolt. But there's little doubt that this plague, this invisible hand, touched every rung of the ladder from muck-soaked serfs to velvet-wrapped dukes. And the ladder itself, it's cracking. You return to your hut and sit by the hearth such as it is. The fire is more ash than flame. Your sister sleeps uneasily, murmuring feverish fragments. You place a damp cloth on her forehead and whisper stories of green fields, of warm pies, of a world without rats or bells or bloodied whips. You lie, of course, but gently. Then you hear it faint music. A lute number pipes, distant but drifting closer. You step outside and see lights bobbing down the lane. A procession, but not a funeral. It's dancing. A group of young nobles, masked and laughing, weaving between trees. Their gowns are muddied, their sleeves torn, but their feet are nimble. They twirl and leap, clutching goblets and tossing petals. One blows a kiss at you before vanishing into the woods. A plague party. These were real, by the way. Some nobles, convinced they'd either survive or die anyway, chose to indulge. Masked balls, drunken serenades, feasts with empty chairs for the dead. Some say they hired actors to perform comedies in graveyards. One group reportedly released white doves in a mass to symbolize the flight of sin. It's unclear if those birds were ever seen again. You stand there, breath catching in your throat, torn between disgust and envy. They have the luxury to pretend. You have the burden to endure. So you walk back inside, check on your sister, pull the cloak tighter, and try to sleep. But even dreams are stained now with masks, with laughter, with fire. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a thick, soupy stink that never leaves part rot, part mildew, part. Something you can't name but feel in your teeth. The kind of smell that clings to the back of your tongue and makes everything taste like wet wool. And the worst part, you're getting used to it. London is dying, slowly, loudly, and with no grace. You shuffle through the muddy streets, dodging wheelbarrows piled high with cloth-covered shapes. No one bothers to ring bells here anymore. There are too many dead. The plague pits have replaced the graveyards. Dug deep, wide, and often overnight, they lie just beyond the city's edge, yawning mouths, eager to swallow another 100 souls before breakfast. And yet as you pass one of them, something odd catches your eye. A face. Not rotting, not sunken, not, well, dead-looking. Just pale, peaceful. The skin hasn't turned black. The eyes haven't glazed over. In fact, it looks like the man might be asleep. You pause, lean closer. No, he's definitely gone. But it's strange, like time forgot to decay him. Historians still puzzle over this. In several plague pits unearthed centuries later, archaeologists have found oddly well-preserved remains. In some cases, even soft tissues like tendons were partially intact. Was it the soil, the cold? Some chemical quirk of decomposition? No one knows. You glance around. A woman tosses in another body, barely glancing down. A child. A brother. She wipes her hands and keeps walking. Even grief is rationed now. Back in the city, the churches struggle. The priests are overwhelmed, performing last rites by the dozen, sometimes in bulk. Some have abandoned their flocks, entirely retreating to monasteries or vanishing into the countryside. But others remain. You remember one Father Ulrich. He used to hand out crusts of bread to orphans and bless newborns with warm, calloused fingers. Now his robes hang in tatters, and his eyes dart like a cornered animal's. He mutters scripture under his breath constantly, even mid-conversation. He keeps a small vial of holy water around his neck and douses himself every hour. You saw him bless a dead rat once. No one had the heart to stop him. There's another pit farther from the center. This one was supposed to be temporary. It's since become a permanent fixture. Someone nailed a wooden sign to the nearest tree, "Here lies the hope of London." Someone else crossed it out and scrawled, "And tomorrow's lunch" underneath. You laugh, then feel guilty for laughing. Dark humor is the only shield left. A group of monks appears on the horizon, chanting and swinging incense. Thick clouds of myrrh and rosemary trail behind them. Some wear scarves soaked in vinegar. Others hold painted icons in front of their faces like divine masks. It doesn't help. One of them sneezes mid-chant, and the others flinch like he pulled a dagger. You walk alongside them, hoping the scent of their spices might hide the ever-present stench. For a moment it works. The rosemary is sharp, earthy, familiar. But then the wind shifts and the plague wins again. You think of your cousin buried in one of these pits. You didn't see him go in, you just heard. Someone said he collapsed outside the baker's shop still holding a half loaf. They buried him before nightfall. Sometimes late at night you wonder if they checked properly. One physician, more scholar than surgeon, once suggested that not everyone in the pits was actually dead. That the line between plague coma and true death was occasionally blurred. That some people might have woken up. Historians still debate whether this is myth or terrifying truth. There are no confirmed records, only scattered stories, whispers. The kind of tale you share at firesides when the wind howls and you want to feel a little colder. Back in the heart of London, you pass a house with red crosses painted on the door. "Lord have mercy" scrawled above it. You know what that means. Containment. The family inside is already dead or dying. No one will open that door until the smell forces it. Sometimes you wonder how anyone survives at all. But some do. That's another mystery. Certain people, bakers, nuns, even beggars, seem untouched. They walk through infected streets, handle the sick, bury the dead, and remain inexplicably well. There's talk of a god mark, a kind of invisible protection. Some say it's in the blood. Others claim it's sin or lack of it. Maybe certain prayers just work better than others. You once saw a woman kiss the forehead of a plague victim, sobbing into his hair. She never caught it. 2 weeks later, she was helping haul bodies with the gravediggers. Historians now think some people carried a natural genetic resistance to the Yersinia pestis bacterium. A handful of alleles passed down through luck or ancestry. But in the moment, all anyone could see was divine favor or a witch's charm. You reach a square where the smell sharpens. Fresh pit. This one's newer. A crowd has gathered not for mourning, but to see. Children peer over the edge. A man sells vinegar-soaked cloths for a penny. A local eccentric reads poetry about worms and eternal silence. He gets applause. You sit for a moment watching the bodies descend. They are us. They were us. And now, their lessons maybe. You remember something. The eccentric said, his voice nasal, theatrical and oddly comforting. The earth is full, so now she eats her children. It wasn't comforting, actually, but you like the rhythm. The pit is half full already. By nightfall, it will vanish under a mound of dirt and forgetfulness. Another silent library under the city. But some pits don't forget. Centuries later, one was unearthed near a train station. The skeletons still curled in fetal positions, stacked like kindling. People passing overhead never knew they walked atop a mass grave. They still do. London never stopped building upward, layering over death, pretending it was temporary. You stand, wipe your hands, head home. The wind picks up and carries the scent with you. The manor gates creak open with a groan like an old man's knees. You step inside, your peasant feet caked in mud and plague pit memories, and suddenly the world changes. It smells like lavender. There's music, lutes, and harpsichords, and no one is screaming. For a moment, you wonder if you've died and stumbled into heaven by accident. But no, this is just where the nobles went. When the plague began to swell in cities like a bruise, no one wanted to touch the rich did what the rich always do, they ran. Up winding roads through flower-strewn fields into stone fortresses, tucked into hills and forests, fortified not just against invaders, but now against their own people. Here in the manors and chateaus, the Black Death is a rumor, a ghost story told at dinner, a reason to pour another goblet of wine and toast one's excellent taste and property location. The nobles are dressed like they haven't read the memo. Silks, brocades, satins so stiff they rustle like leaves. You watch as a young man, barely 17 and half drunk, spins a noblewoman in circles as she giggles. A lutenist plucks at his instrument in the corner like this is any other summer gathering. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, a town is burning its own dead. Historians still argue whether these flight-to-the-country escapes were effective or just temporarily lucky. Some manors were wiped out weeks later. Others stood untouched sanctuaries on a hill of bones. There's a letter from a Florentine countess who proudly wrote, "No servant of mine shall bring the city's filth within these walls." She died 2 weeks later, her entire household followed by the month's end. But for now, this manor is alive, vibrant, almost offensively healthy. The kitchen smells of roast duck and cinnamon. You didn't know cinnamon was a thing peasants could smell in real life. The nobles sip spiced wine and tell jokes that end with someone pretending to faint. You don't laugh, not because it isn't funny, but because you've already seen it, and it doesn't end with laughter. A servant passes by balancing a silver tray topped with sugared almonds. You blink. This is the first clean face you've seen in weeks. He doesn't make eye contact. Maybe he's pretending you're not real, some apparition that wandered in from the fog. Or maybe he's too tired. These escapes may look like paradise, but someone's still scrubbing the latrines. The nobles dance, slowly then faster, a minuet, then something livelier. A new song begins and a nobleman twirls toward the windows. Candlelight flickers across stained glass. Outside, the moon rises over hills that are suspiciously free of plague carts. They are also free of truth, because this life is a performance, a denial, a costume ball thrown at the end of the world. You remember a document centuries old preserved in the margins of a ledger. It describes a noble family who ordered a string quartet to play in their orchard every morning so the birds do not forget joy. That family died within days. The musicians played until their fingertips bled, then left the instruments beneath the trees and walked into the forest, never to return. Quirky, yes. Tragic, also yes. Historians still debate whether these manors provided emotional refuge or deepened the societal divide. One thing's clear: when nobles closed their gates, they locked out not just the sick, but the soul of the country. Inside these walls, time doesn't pass. The tapestries remain clean. The dogs are groomed. The floors are scrubbed with vinegar, rosemary, and denial. You hear one noble suggest a mask. A themed party, everyone dresses as death. The irony, he says, will be delicious. You wonder if he knows what irony tastes like when you've eaten rat stew for 3 days straight. Still you linger, because it's warm here. Because for 1 hour, you're not ankle deep in the horror of being forgotten. You drift into a corner near a fire so perfectly contained that the logs seem to burn politely. 2 young women discuss the city. One of them claims she heard a priest try to exorcise the plague from a bakery by beating it with a crucifix-shaped baguette. You don't correct her. It's not entirely implausible. You doze a little and dream of bread that isn't moldy. But even here, the plague finds a way in. Always. It starts small. A cough from a servant, a flush in a stable boy's cheeks, a dropped tray. Then the whispers, "Was it the cook?" The washerwoman, one of the footmen. Fear multiplies faster than bacteria. The manor doctor is summoned. He wears a robe that billows dramatically and a mask shaped like a bird's beak stuffed with herbs. He looks like a tragic toucan. The nobles trust him because he speaks Latin and carries a stick. He waves it over a sick girl and declares her unclean. 2 guards carry her out the back. You never see her again. The party continues that evening, but the laughter's thinner, a little more brittle. Someone orders more wine. Someone else coughs. Everyone pretends not to hear it. Eventually, even this safe place begins to fray. One noble family rides farther into the hills. Another takes to their boat and sails to their summer estate. The manor empties slowly like a balloon losing air. You don't say goodbye. You just drift away one morning unnoticed. Back into the mud, back into reality. And as the manor gates close behind you, you realize something strange. For all their wealth, the nobles still feared death. But for you, death had already sent invitations. The real horror wasn't dying. It was living through this. The wind carries a strange scent as you step onto the open field. You've come to the edge of London now, or what's left of it. The city doesn't moan or cry out anymore, it sighs. Soft and low like a house breathing its last. Somewhere behind you a church bell tolls without rhythm. Not a call to mass, no one's left to hear it, but perhaps a nervous habit. Or maybe the priest is just trying to remind the heavens he's still alive. Ahead is a wide patch of earth unnaturally still. It's one of the plague pits. You might not recognize it right away. There's no grand sign, no rows of markers. Just a slight rise in the earth where too many bodies lie too close together. It smells faintly of lime and something sweeter decay in slow motion. Welcome to medieval burial on fast forward. When the Black Death hit full stride, London ran out of space to bury its dead properly. Graveyards overflowed coffins stacked like firewood. The solution? Dig deeper. Dig wider. Plague pits mass. Graves sometimes large enough to swallow a city block became the grim default. You didn't get a headstone, you didn't get a prayer, you just got thrown in with the rest. You pause and picture the moment, a cart creaking to a halt, bodies unloaded by exhausted hands, prayers muttered with numb lips. No one cries anymore. No one has the strength. One mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists uncovered pits like these in East Smithfield. Excavations revealed victims laid in layers, row upon row, with surprising order. That's the word scholars use, surprising. Even in chaos, someone tried to preserve a bit of dignity. But here's the unsettling bit: some of those skeletons look oddly well preserved. The soil, maybe. The way they were packed. Or was it something stranger? Historians still argue whether the preservation is due to ritual chemistry or sheer accident. Some think it's the lime. Others wonder if medieval burial customs, though rushed, still honored sacred forms unknowingly beneficial to preservation. A few fringe voices even whisper about alchemical rituals, secret knowledge lost beneath layers of rot and time. You kneel and run your hand over the ground. It's firm now. Grass dares to grow again. A few wildflowers poke through, oblivious to the bone bed beneath them. A bee lands near your foot and buzzes away like nothing ever happened here. But you know better. You've seen what lies beneath. And it makes you wonder, how did some survive this? Because they did. Not everyone died. Some people, peasants, even walked through plague-ridden towns without so much as a sniffle. Children who lost their families and begged for scraps managed to live another 60 years. Herbalists who bathed in vinegar, nuns who slept beside the sick, even a midwife who swore by garlic and goat milk they lived. Was it luck, genetics, or something we've forgotten? There's one case half lost to time of a stable boy in York who reportedly shared quarters with plague victims for weeks and never got sick. He lived to be 92 and claimed it was because he washed with brine and sang to his horse every night. You're not sure if that's science, but at this point, who's to say? Others weren't so lucky. Some people collapsed within hours of the first cough. One moment they were drinking ale, the next they were bleeding from their gums and whispering final words to a wall. No goodbyes, no explanations, just gone. Even now, scientists argue over why the plague hit some harder than others. Historians still debate how much of this was environmental rat density flea behavior, living conditions, and how much came down to individual immunity. Or maybe it was psychological. Some claim those who believed they'd survive had higher odds, a medieval placebo. You lean back and look at the sky. A lone cloud drifts by, lazy and soft. The air hums heavy with memory. And then you feel it, something ancient, something invisible. The awareness that you're walking on centuries of stories, some of which were never told because they ended too fast. There are no voices here now, just silence. But not the peaceful kind. It's the silence of forgetting, of secrets buried with the bones. You think of the flagellants, the nobles, the poor herbalists who made teas that might have worked the quacks who sold leeches in bulk, and all of them, victims and survivors, disappear into the same dirt. The strange part. Some of these plague pits weren't rediscovered until the 1980s. Imagine you're building an office park and suddenly a backhoe reveals 300 medieval Londoners just waiting. One archaeologist described it as opening a door in time. Another fainted. Today, some of these sites have been memorialized. Quiet plaques, small gardens. Others were paved over, forgotten again. Because modern cities don't always want to remember what lies beneath their sidewalks. But here on this field, you remember. You take a step back, then another. You let the wind carry your breath out over the grass over the buried ones. You think briefly about singing them something. That stable boy's horse tune, maybe. But instead you just whisper. Not a prayer, not even a goodbye. Just a thank you for surviving. So that someone could remember, even if it's just a sleep-deprived YouTube listener in 2025. You leave the plague pit behind, but it follows you not with footsteps, but in the air. The silence, the itch behind your eyes that says you've seen something you probably shouldn't have. As you walk, a new sound trickles through laughter. Not hearty, joyful laughter, but something sharper, high-pitched, slightly off. You squint toward the manor house on the hill. There against all odds is a party. Nobles in silks prance across the lawn like nothing's happened. Music drifts lazily through the hedges' lutes, and recorders a little flat from the humidity. Goblets slosh red wine. Ribbons flutter. Someone's juggling pears. Because of course they are. Welcome to the elite version of surviving the apocalypse. As the plague swept through towns and villages, many nobles did. What nobles do best ran away from the problem while dramatically blaming it on the poor. Cities, filthy and infected. The countryside peaceful, full of birdsong, and most importantly, fewer corpses. They fled to their manors sometimes with entire entourages, and tried to quarantine themselves with what one historian called delusional optimism and cheese platters. Some hosted grand banquets to pass the time. Others organized poetry readings, elaborate hunts, and even dance parties, anything to drown out the sound of bells tolling for the dead just a few miles away. This wasn't just escapism, it was a flex. The message was clear: the world might be burning, but we're still wearing Italian velvet. Mainstream historical fact. Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron, yes. The spicy book was inspired by exactly this scene. A group of wealthy young Florentines escaping the plague by retreating to a villa and telling each other stories for 10 days. It's the original quarantine content Netflix binges replaced by medieval flirtation and the occasional parable about sin. But let's talk fringe. Some accounts say nobles believed the plague couldn't survive where joy was abundant. Laugh hard enough and maybe the germs would bounce off. Others carried posies in their sleeves or burned juniper twigs indoors. One noblewoman even surrounded her manor with garlic-stuffed scarecrows, stylish and stinky. You'd think the wealthy would be safest. Clean water, big spaces, better food, fewer fleas maybe. But the plague wasn't picky. Servants brought it in. Supplies brought it in. Sometimes just sheer bad luck brought it in. There's one well-documented case where a noble family sealed themselves inside their estate. No visitors, no deliveries, and still got sick. No one's sure how. A rat hiding in the firewood. A contaminated letter. Historians still argue whether true isolation was ever possible or whether the illusion of safety was just another aristocratic myth. It didn't help that doctors were often part of these escape plans. And by doctors we mean men in bird masks, armed with sticks whose main advice was avoid bad smells. They'd stuff their beak-like masks with herbs and spices, then poke patients from a distance. It was basically plague cosplay, creepy, ineffective, and strangely on-brand. Some nobles hired multiple plague doctors thinking quantity equaled immunity. Others banned anyone who so much as sneezed within earshot. There were actual cough protocols that required suspects to be locked in stables. One duke reportedly had a special quarantine gazebo built, just in case a guest looked peaky. Of course, behind all this pageantry was raw panicked fear. Because once the coughing started, the silks didn't matter. The title didn't matter. The gold rings, the fancy perfumes, the peacock roast at last night's feast, they didn't help. The Black Death democratized death in a way medieval society wasn't prepared for. For once, no amount of wealth guaranteed survival. But the attempt was spectacular. You edge closer to the party now, half invisible among the hedges. A man with a powdered face twirls a woman in a gown embroidered with roses. The sun hits her brooch just right, it flashes like fire. You wonder if she knows what's happening down the hill. If she's already buried siblings, if she's dancing so fast because standing still means thinking. Someone starts a round of riddles. A servant pours wine from a crystal jug. You catch the faint smell of rosewater sugar and roasted meat. And underneath it all, the tiniest whiff of something rotting. Maybe from the cellar. Maybe from the world. But no one flinches. There's an argument unfolding now, two men in embroidered tunics, disagreeing about whether laughter wards off plague better than prayer. One insists God favors joy. The other says only fasting and silence will save them. Their debate is interrupted when a woman sneezes. Silence, then a laugh, then inexplicably a slow clap. The woman winks and drinks from her cup. Everyone exhales. For now, you take a step back. The hedges rustle, but no one hears. The party hums along like a music box winding down bright and brittle. And you, peasant observer of the apocalypse, head back down the hill. Back to the mud, the fields, the bell tolls. Because this isn't your world. Yours doesn't come with ribbons or wine. Just soil and sweat and a very long list of names no one remembers anymore. You return to your village, or what's left of it. The gate, once a creaky plank nailed into place with more hope than structural integrity, hangs crooked. The fields are thin, the fences sag, and the silence has an edge to it, like everyone is holding their breath, but no one's left to exhale. The worst has passed, they say, but you know better. It's not just the disease, it's what's left in its wake. Life continues, but it stumbles like a drunk monk through a candlelit chapel. Crooked, grim, surreal. And now things are changing in ways no one quite understands yet. You hear it first from an old man outside the blacksmith's hut. He's mumbling about his son refusing to work the land. Says he wants wages, not grain, not permission to marry, actual coin. Blasphemy, basically. Because here's what they never taught you. When you were busy learning to plow beg and not die, plagues break systems. And feudalism. Oh, that was a system built on the brittle bones of obligation. Before the plague, you worked the Lord's land, gave a chunk of what you grew to him, and in return, you got a hut protection and maybe the occasional roast turnip during feast days. After the plague, there are fewer of you, a lot fewer, and suddenly your value goes up. Labor becomes scarce. Entire villages are ghost towns. Monasteries sit empty. Cows wander through abandoned farms, mooing at no one. Fields are overgrown. Bread is harder to come by than a sunny English afternoon. And guess who still needs you? The lords. They might be sniffing rosewater and debating the divine merits of goat cheese, but their estates need tilling. Their granaries need filling. Their vineyards need trimming. And you can name your price. That's the beginning of something revolutionary. One mainstream historical fact here: wages across Europe did rise after the Black Death. In England, laborers started demanding pay instead of servitude. Some even moved to find better deals mobility that would have been unthinkable a generation earlier. You're no longer tied to a single patch of land like a rusty hinge. Now you can walk, ask, negotiate. Imagine that, a peasant negotiating. Of course the lords weren't thrilled. The English government passed laws like the Statute of Laborers in 1351, trying to freeze wages at pre-plague levels. It was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a spoon. Didn't work. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some peasants started wearing nicer clothes. Not full-blown noble finery, but little flourishes, a belt with brass studs, boots with extra stitching, a hat with a feather. It was their way of saying, I'm not your thrall anymore. Some scholars argue whether this shift directly led to the fall of feudalism. Others suggest it just hastened the decline already underway. But no one disputes that the plague shook society so hard that the hierarchy cracked. Suddenly you, the peasant, are important, not because of who you are, but because of who's missing. Your neighbor's dead. His kids are gone. The priest buried in a shallow grave behind the church. That means you have options, and options are dangerous. They make you dream, And nothing scares the system more than a peasant with a dream and two strong arms. You walk through the village square and it feels like the rules are being rewritten in real time. A woman with soot on her cheeks is haggling with the miller loudly. That never happened before. A boy you knew quiet, hunched, the kind who used to apologize when he breathed too loud, is now standing on a stool reading from a scroll. He's teaching people how to read. This would have gotten him excommunicated 2 years ago. Now no one blinks. Because what are they going to do? Arrest everyone. There's talk of rebellion. Not now, but soon. Of course, not everything's roses and literacy. Some lords clamp down harder. Others raise rents. Some set up elaborate loyalty oaths that basically say, work for me or else. You even hear of a few nobles rounding up peasants and forcing them back onto the land at sword point. Old habits die hard, but the tide is turning. Not evenly, not quickly, but definitely. The plague didn't just kill it, cleared space. And in that space, something new is growing. You don't know the word middle class yet, or renaissance, or market economy, but you feel the shift in the looser fit of your tunic, in the way your master calls you by name now, not boy, in the half-joking way someone said you should run for Reeve next year. And maybe, just maybe you will. Because if this horror has taught you anything, it's that the world can flip on its head overnight. One day you're burying your brother. The next you're planting barley on his land. And when the priest finally returns gaunt and blinking, he doesn't scold you for taking charge. He just nods and asks for food. So you give him some, because you're the one who has it now. You, the peasant, the survivor, the one who's still standing. For now. The changes keep creeping in quiet as a cat sharp as a sickle. You don't notice them all at once, but over time they pile up like firewood for a winter that might never come. One day you wake to find the village reeve replaced by a younger man, barely 30 literate, and somehow convinced the manor's accounts should actually balance. The old one died, of course, somewhere between the second wave and the food shortage. No one wept, not even his dog. And now, strangely, people are listening to you. You a peasant, a survivor, a former nobody who used to be more dirt than man in the social order. It's not just your strength anymore. It's your knowledge. You know how to harvest. You know when the river floods. You remember which fields rot first and which trees shelter the owls. People whisper about the new value of common sense. Imagine that peasant wisdom once mocked now precious. Even the nobles have started acting differently, well, the ones who survived. Which brings us to the absurd luxury of elite life during the plague. Because while you were spooning barley porridge next to your cousin's grave, the wealthy were inventing a whole new category of emotional detachment dancing while the world ends. The nobles, those glorious, silk-draped daydreamers, retreated to their country manners like rats fleeing a burning ship. Except their ships were made of marble and wine cellars. They quarantined themselves with musicians' feasts, scented baths, and something approaching denial as a coping mechanism. In Italy, the poet Boccaccio wrote The Decameron, a book about a group of aristocrats who leave the plague-ridden city to go tell each other saucy stories in a countryside villa. It's part fairy tale, part satire, part passive-aggressive death note to the old world. Historians still debate whether these elite escape parties were as widespread as literature suggests, or whether they're exaggerated shadows of a few notable examples. But what's certain is this while towns were coughing up their lungs, the nobility were toasting absinthe and composing lute duets. You hear rumors of nobles hosting masked balls in secluded castles, complete with plague doctor costumes worn ironically. The juxtaposition is almost laughable if you had the strength to laugh. Some accounts say noble women began painting red spots on their cheeks, mimicking plague boils like it was the newest beauty trend. That's the fringe tidbit for this section, macabre makeup as fashion. You wish that was a joke. It's not. You think back to your lord, he vanished during the second wave, never to return. Some say he died. Others think he made it to France, where the wine flows like water and peasants still do what they're told. But his manor remains, empty, echoing. You've passed by it a few times on your way to barter eggs, and something strange stirs in your chest when you see the carved stone above the archway. He built it on your work. Now Ivy climbs over the front gate undisturbed. No more guards, no more feasts, just wind silence and maybe a ghost or two in the pantry. Some villagers are talking about repurposing it a school maybe, or a grain store, or more ambitiously a tavern with beds and ale and music. You don't dare speak the idea aloud, but the fantasy is there. Why not? The worst thing that could happen already has Everything else is just dust and rearrangement. But even in this strange new order, fear hangs in the air like chimney smoke. A second wave, a third, a new disease. People are still wary of crowded chapels and public wells. Masks are worn not for fashion, but for fear. Some even line their collars with herbs. Rosemary, thyme, even a chunk of crushed garlic. Because, well, it worked once, didn't it? Nobody knows how it started. Nobody knows when it will truly end. But the power balance has shifted, permanently. In England, the seeds of revolt are sprouting quiet, bitter, inevitable. You hear talk of serfs petitioning the crown demanding fair wages and the right to move. The peasants' revolt is still a few decades away, but the firewood is already stacked. You can smell the smoke. The plague may have decimated half the population, but in doing so it broke centuries of calcified hierarchy. It gave breath to the forgotten, and took the breath from the entitled. That's the trait, apparently. You glance around your village and feel both ancient and newborn. Half grief, half opportunity. The alewife now runs the town meeting. The smith's daughter manages trade routes, and you're teaching a boy how to milk goats. His father didn't make it, and he needs to eat. You think maybe this is what rebuilding looks like. Not with kings and banners, but with people who remember what was lost, and what should never be lost again. You wake before dawn out of habit, not necessity. The village is quiet in the way it only is now, post-plague, post-panic. There's still a morning mist hanging low, and somewhere a rooster crows a half-hearted challenge to a world that's no longer listening. This is what survival looks like. It's not heroic. It's not poetic. It's not even particularly clean, but it's something. A slow rebuilding. A rethreading of broken fabric, one spindle, one thatched roof, one loaf of oat bread at a time. You pass the well and nod to Marta, the brewer's widow. She's drawing water without fear now. She's learned to boil it, bless it, and flavor it with fennel to mask the memory of disease. Her two sons, once sickly, now run barefoot with slings and wooden swords, imagining themselves as knighted protectors of this strange, half-healed world. And the village, it's reshaping itself like softened wax. There's a meeting hall where the Lord's hunting shed used to stand. There's a barter table beside the chapel. The priest now gardens more than he preaches. And yes, people still die, but not in waves, not in horror. In the ordinary way again, a bad fall, a rough winter, old age. In this normalcy, oddly, we find relief. Mainstream historical fact. Here in many parts of Europe, especially Western regions, the feudal system bent further under pressure. With fewer people available to work, the land-surviving peasants negotiated better terms. Freedom of movement, wage labor, even land ownership in some rare but radical instances. A crumbling hierarchy gave rise to whispers of autonomy. Historians still debate how direct this transformation really was. Did the Black Death cause the decline of feudalism? Or merely reveal the rot that was already there? Maybe both. But from where you stand with hay in your boots and calluses on your hands, you know something big is ending. And something new, raw, and unnamed is beginning. It's in the way no one bows to the manor anymore. In the way old songs are sung louder with harmonies that don't quite match but still swell with power. And it's in the stories told by firelight where the plague becomes not just a monster but a turning point. A tale of suffering, yes, but also of weird, accidental freedom. Here's your quirky tidbit to close the chapter in the wake of so much death. Some medieval people actually celebrated the newfound quiet. One monk wrote that the air felt cleaner, purer. Another mentioned sleeping longer with dreams unmarred by the stink of neighbors. Grim, sure. But there's humor there too. That macabre medieval flavor. Like finding a daisy growing in a battlefield. You settle into your straw mattress now, shared with no one. You're lucky in this twisted world to have space. The ceiling leaks in one corner. The bread is a little stale. But you're here. And that's no small thing. Because in the centuries that will follow, they'll talk about your time, your plague, your world. They'll study the pits, the masks, the bells, the herbs. They'll argue about numbers and timelines. But what they might forget, and what you remember, is how the world didn't end. It changed. And you had to keep living through it. Not just breathing, but making choices. Growing things. Comforting others. Laughing when no one expected you to. You peasant of the 14th century bore more weight than a king's crown. You outlived it. And in the quiet after the dying, you planted something that would bloom awkwardly, clumsily, but still bloom. Hope. And now, everything slows. The candle has burned low on your wooden table, casting its last gentle flickers onto stone walls, softened by time. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees with a whisper that carries centuries of stories, barely brushing your ears as your breathing evens out. You've made it to the end, not just of a story, but of a world once suffocating and relentless. The bells have stopped ringing. The shouting is long gone, and what's left is the hush after the storm, the kind of silence that hums with survival. Your body rests heavy now, sinking into wherever you're curled up tonight. Your blankets might be wool, or maybe just your imagination, but they wrap around you like the earth cradles a seed, quiet, full of promise, not quite asleep, but not awake either. Let your mind float there somewhere between the wheat fields and the village square, between a peasant's chores and the slow rebuilding of something better. You've walked through disease, through dread, through dirt and prayer and plague. You've seen death pass your door, and you've watched life creep back in on its own terms. No rush now. There's nothing left to fear, not tonight. The bells won't ring. The rats are gone. And the air smells of lavender again, not smoke or rot. Your breath deepens. Your thoughts drift farther. If you listen closely, you might even hear a lute playing somewhere distant, some surviving soul still making music because they can. You've survived. You've witnessed. You've endured. Sleep comes not as a stranger now, but as an old friend pulling you gently into the folds of time, whispering softly, "It's over for now. Rest. You've done enough."